Hey everybody, welcome to Cinema Trip Reviews. Grab your coffee and pie, because today we're going to be talking about Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me. Hey everybody, welcome to Cinema Trip Reviews. I am Wyatt, of course. Today we're going to be talking about David Lynch's 1992 movie, Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me. For those that are watching this review, if you haven't seen the first two seasons of Twin Peaks, those are essential. You have to go out and watch those before you watch the movie. Twin Peaks, the original series, came out 1990 through 1991 to critical acclaim. People loved Twin Peaks in that first season. After that first season, TV networks were putting a lot of pressure on David Lynch to solve the mystery behind the murder of Lara Palmer. He had no intention of ever releasing who the killer was. He was going to draw out the series with as long as possible, him and Mark Frost, who co-wrote it together. After the series, because he stayed on for the whole first season, he stayed on for half of that second season, up until about when they revealed the killer, maybe a little after. I'm pretty sure he was still an executive producer on it at that point. He just wasn't involved with the actual writing or the directing of it at that point. He came back to direct, I'm pretty sure, the last two episodes, or the last episode of season 2, which is by far one of the greatest episodes of not only Twin Peaks, but television history, in my opinion.
I'll see you again in 25 years. Meanwhile,
if you haven't already seen it and you're interested, I'm pretty sure it's on Paramount Plus, but you can always go out and cop the Twin Peaks Blu-ray collection. It includes both the first two seasons. Also, it includes the 2017 The Return 18-part series, miniseries as well. It's only about $60, but you get all of them, all in this one package here. Kind of a little backstory behind this movie. David Lynch started work on this movie about a month after the finale of season 2. He got done with the finale and he thought there was just more story to tell. From what he has said, he was always in love with the character of Lara Palmer. He loved that character so much that after the show ended and they didn't get picked up for another season, he wanted to go back and revisit Lara Palmer herself. He wanted to actually go into what this character was like. We never really got to see her at all. She was just a corpse through the Twin Peaks series, and she's just talked about here and there, and they're trying to solve this mystery. But in this movie, you actually get to see Lara Palmer's last 7 days before she gets killed. So you actually get to see her personality, how she was, how she interacted with all the other characters in Twin Peaks. It was very interesting, and I think a lot of people going into this movie, because this movie got a lot of hate. This movie got so much hate when it came out. Whenever it premiered at Cannes Film Festival, it got met with boos and jeers and hisses because a lot of people thought it was going to be a continuation of what happened there at the end of season 2. Because the end of season 2, if everybody is, I'm hoping you've seen it, ends on a completely huge cliffhanger. You don't know what's going to happen there. You got evil Coop, coming out of the lodge. His doppelganger merged with Bob. They're out there in the open. Good Coop is trapped in the Black Lodge. And of course, you don't get the rest of that story 25 years later. A lot of people expected the movie to be a continuation of the series. Completely different. I mean, as anybody that knows David Lynch or is a fan of David Lynch work, he doesn't do anything by the norm at all or as expected. He goes completely the opposite direction of what's expected. Now, Special Agent Dale Cooper, played by Kyle MacLachlan, was going to have a much bigger role in this movie as well, but he had a falling out with David Lynch just because he felt like David Lynch kind of abandoned the TV show. He was just kind of on iffy terms on him. He did come back, but it's a far reduced role. At the beginning of this movie, you actually see an agent played by Isaak, Chester Desmond. Cooper's role was actually supposed to be him. Kyle MacLachlan was supposed to be Agent Dale Cooper, and he was actually supposed to be in this whole first part of this movie where Isaak was. But, of course, with everything going on between him and David Lynch, he actually just came back for a little tiny role. You do see him throughout the movie, but it's not like a lot of Twin Peaks fans expected or wanted. Now, the first cut of this movie apparently is 5 hours long whenever he made this. And when you watch it, it's a completely different feel from the actual Twin Peaks series, where the original Twin Peaks series, it's very quirky in its own way. It's funny, but it's also very serious and can be very scary at times. And it has a mix of everything, whereas this movie itself, it's very dark. It's very gritty. It's very gross. You feel like you need a shower after watching this movie. Now, there was supposed to be a lot of lighthearted parts in this. A lot of the stuff that fans are familiar with the show was supposed to be in this movie as well. Anybody that has any knowledge of this movie, and on the Blu-ray itself, there's David Lynch put together what we call missing pieces. And it's pretty much an hour and a half, almost a full movie worth of deleted scenes and just scenes that were cut from the movie just to get it down to about 2 hours and 10 minutes, almost 2.5 hour runtime. And going back and if you actually watching the missing pieces themselves, there's a lot of cut content in there that would have made the movie kind of feel like a classic Twin Peaks episode, just an extended episode. You're getting some lighthearted, just quirkiness. You actually get a scene at the sawmill with Pete Martell, played by Jack Nance. It's a pretty funny scene, but you also get a lot of other lighthearted scenes in the missing pieces that you're seriously missing from the movie, because the movie is, man, it's kind of a downer. There is a little like comedy relief things, more so in the kind of the beginning part, more so with Sam and Chet Desmond, Chris Isaak, and Kiefer Sutherland's characters. But yeah, the rest of the movie, man, it's very dark. There's a lot of serious dark subject matter in it. A lot of the Twin Peaks cast ended up coming back for this movie. Even some of the cast that you don't see in the movie, they are in the deleted scenes, like I mentioned with Jack Nance, Pete Martell. But a couple of the missing ones is Sheryl Lee as Audrey. She's not in the movie at all. She was supposed to have a role in the movie, but some scheduling conflicts arose, and plus she kind of had a little falling out with David Lynch at the time as well. And most famously, Lara Flynn Boyle didn't come back as Donna, just because she had some scheduling conflicts as well. So that's why you get Myra Kelly in as Donna in this movie. A lot of people actually prefer her as Donna. Me, I'm used to the classic Twin Peaks Donna. You know, I would actually like to see Lara Flynn Boyle in this role. Not sure she would have, given to what kind of Donna goes through in the movie. But yeah, going into the cast of characters here, of course, you got David Lynch reprising his role as Gordon Cole, one of my favorite characters in the Twin Peaks universe. He has a tiny role in this there in the beginning. You also get Ray Weiss as Leland Palmer, Sheryl Lee as Lara Palmer, of course, Myra Kelly, Chris Isaak, David Bowie as Philip Jeffries, who a lot of people may know. And then Angelo Badalamenti came back and actually did the music for this and the score. You know, classic Twin Peaks music. You get a couple of the classic music cues throughout this movie, but a lot of it is just an original score, but it feels very Twin Peaks as well. Now, to get into the actual movie, starts off very just, you know, somber, very kind of dark. It's just a fuzzy TV screen, and then you just see something just smash through it and break the TV. Pretty much just saying this isn't the Twin Peaks that you've come to know and love. This is going to be a whole different animal. We're busting out of the TV. We're going straight into the movie. It's going to be dark and gritty, and you're going to be seeing stuff that you couldn't see on TV. And then it flashes to a body floating in the creek river, which is Teresa Banks. Anybody that has watched the Twin Peaks show knows about Teresa Banks. You haven't really seen her at all. You just hear of her. This is about a year before Lara Palmer got killed. And then it cuts to old David Lynch as Gordon Cole. He gets on the phone and is requesting Chester Desmond, played by Chris Isaak, to go and investigate this murder.
I'm calling you from Portland, Oregon.
Okay, Gordon.
Oregon!
And as he gets on the phone with Chris Isaak's Chester Desmond, they have a bus full of kids pulled over, and they're arresting two of the girls that are there. It's just kind of a weird, just something very David Lynch, just an odd scene. You get to the airport where you meet Gordon Cole, so it's Chester or Chet Desmond, Chris Isaak, you get Gordon Cole, and then you get Sam, played by a younger Kiefer Sutherland, which is interesting to see him in a Twin Peaks movie. And then David Lynch introduces Lil.
She's my mother's sister's girl.
And Lil is an enigma in this movie. She's wearing a blue rose, and she's doing all these. She has like a sour face. She's squeezing her fist. She's hopping up and down from one foot, and all these things that Lil is doing, it actually means something in the grand scheme of things. It's like a secret code, and this is kind of David Lynch kind of having fun with the audience a little bit, because it kind of represents David Lynch's movies. It kind of represents David Lynch's movies in a way. He's putting all these little hints and things you can figure out, and they all mean something, but you gotta have to figure it all out and put it together yourself. Now, the first time I watched this movie, I was one of the people that kind of expected more of the classic Twin Peaks, and I understand why a lot of people were upset the first time I watched this. Now, going back and watching it multiple times since, and more so on this rewatch, I actually really enjoyed this movie a lot more than I did originally. So, I mean, I got to, because my expectations weren't there. I know what the movie is at this point. So I actually got to sit there and enjoy Chet and Sam's little relationship, just them talking with each other, going to investigate this case. But Sam's kind of new to this whole thing. He's very green with these sort of things. And on the way to investigate the body into the sheriff's station, Chet's kind of explaining what all these little things that Lil was doing means in the grand scheme of things.
Both eyes blinking means trouble higher up. She had one hand in her pocket, which means they're hiding something.
Except for the blue rose. He cannot explain the blue rose, and he won't explain the blue rose. And you don't really find out what the blue rose is unless you read the Twin Peaks secret history books that came out, which are actually a pretty good read. I recommend those. Or if you go and watch the Twin Peaks Return show, you don't really know what the blue rose is until then. And they make their way to Deer Meadow Sheriff, and everything they encounter in this first like 20 minutes, 25 minutes of the movie, half hour, with Chet and Sam, it's very like a bizarro world Twin Peaks, very opposite Twin Peaks. It's hard to explain, but the sheriff station that they go to, it's complete opposite of the Twin Peaks sheriff station. The people aren't friendly at all. It's very a dark and like kind of a not well taken care of police station. The diner they go to, it's not the Double R diner from Twin Peaks. It's kind of a dimly lit diner with nobody in it. The waitress is a smart ass in it. Everything they encounter is kind of a very opposite of Twin Peaks. So it's like, this is what I mentioned. It's a bizarro world of Twin Peaks. So it's interesting to see those contrasts. But they go to the Deer Meadow Sheriff Department. The deputy is a straight-up asshole. Chris Isaak ends up having to grab him by the nose to get him out of the way. Doesn't take no shit from nobody. He goes and he talks to the sheriff. The sheriff isn't cooperative. He's just as much of a dick as the deputy is. But Chris Isaak ends up getting all the information from him, getting all the evidence from him, and going to investigate the body. Now, from what everybody knows by watching Twin Peaks, the bodies that they find end up having like a little tiny letter stuffed in under their ring fingernail. And since Teresa Banks is one of the first bodies, they end up finding this. And oh, I remember them talking about this in the series. They're up there until like 3 a.m, just kind of going over, doing the autopsy, investigating the body. They end up going over to Hap's Diner. Like what I mentioned, it's complete opposite of the Double R Diner in Twin Peaks. Very dimly lit, very kind of gross. Nobody's there. The waitress there is a smart ass.
You want to hear about our specials? We don't have any.
They make their way over to the Fat Trout Trailer Park, where they're going to investigate Teresa Banks' trailer. You get introduced to a David Lynch regular, Harry Dean Stanton. He plays the kind of just a jerk. He just doesn't want to deal with any of this bullshit. He's the owner of the trailer park itself. He's the one showing him around, taking him to the trailer. They're investigating the trailer and everything. Chet Desmond takes a look at a picture of Teresa Banks, and she's wearing this golden green ring with a symbol on the front of it. And if you take a closer look, you'll notice it's like that the Black Lodge, the owl mark from the old from the Twin Peaks series there. So you know it has something to do with the Black Lodge. But they're investigating the trailer and everything. He sees the picture of her with the ring on. And even when they were investigating the body, they noticed that there was a ring mark on her, but there was no ring. And they were trying to, and the box of evidence, then all her belongings, there's no ring in there. So Chet's trying to figure out what happened to this ring. Is it a key to this mystery? Is it a key to the murder? What's going on here? And as they're walking around the trailer, this weird old lady walks in and just stares at him and has like just has this cane and an ice bag just sitting there. He goes out and it shows the telephone pole, specifically number 6, which comes back eventually again. And as through this course of the movie, I'll mention it later, telephone poles and electricity has a lot to do with a lot of what's going on here. Whether the entities in the Black Lodge, the White Lodge, it has a lot to do with what's going on in Twin Peaks. More so even in the Return series, electricity has a lot to do with this. They go back to the sheriff's department. They have an ambulance there. They're going to get the body. The sheriff's like, "You're not taking this body." He's like, "Well, it's not really your decision. We're the FBI. It's out of your hands." And he's like, "I want to know what happened to the ring." And even though the sheriff's such a dick, it's such a funny line where he's like, "I want to know where the ring is. Where's the ring?" He's like,
"We got a phone here. It's got a little ring."
Chet just has a funny feeling, and he's talking with Sam outside a little bit, and Sam's like, "There's just something I don't understand." He's like, "There's something Blue Rose." He's like, "I feel like this has a lot to do with the Blue Rose." And Chet just says, like, "I'm gonna have to go back." Chet tells Sam, "I'm gonna go back to the trailer park and take a look around. I feel like we're missing something." Sam just insinuates, like, this has something to do with the Blue Rose, doesn't it?
One thing has been troubling me. The Blue Rose. You're going back to the trailer park for the Blue Rose.
Cut to the trailer park. He's taking another look around. He specifically looks at the light, at the electrical post number 6, and it goes up and it's looking at the wires and everything. And with the return, you would normally hear like the electricity, like the crackles and the sounds of the electric. But something catches his eye, and he kind of walks over, and it's just this small trailer. It's like white and gold, and there's a bright light on the inside of it, and it catches his eye, and he walks on over to it. He takes a look down, and he notices under the trailer there's a pile of dirt, the golden green ring sitting right on top of the dirt, and as soon as he goes to grab it, it just fades to black. And that's the end of our boy Chris Isaak as Chet Desmond, man. You don't get any explanation on what happened to him, even through the Secret History books and the Twin Peaks Return. You get a mention of him in this movie, but you don't ever find out what happened to him, or you don't ever hear about them talking about him really again. Cut to Philly. You actually get to see Cooper once again. He goes and tells Gordon Cole about the dream.
"I was worried about today because of the dream I told you about."
And as he's doing this, it doesn't explain why he does this, but he runs over and he stands in front of the security camera, runs back in, looks at the actual console where you can see the footage of the camera, and he kind of keeps running back and forth between there. And as this is happening, my God, it's David Bowie. He hops off the elevator and he's walking through the hallway. And as he's walking through the hallway, Cooper steps out of the security camera and goes in and looks at the camera, and his image is still on that security camera as David Bowie's walking by. There's some fuckery going on, but you get one of the more famous scenes in Twin Peaks lore and Twin Peaks history is Philip Jeffries, David Bowie, coming into the Philadelphia FBI offices after, I think they said, like 10, 20 years of him being missing. He shows up.
"I'm not going to talk about Judy. In fact, we're not going to talk about Judy at all. We're going to keep her out of it."
"Gordon?"
And some of the stuff you don't find out until the return 25 years later, where David Bowie immediately points at Cooper like,
"Who do you think this is there?"
Some bumps in the old noggin itself.
Insinuating that is the bad Cooper. It's not the good Cooper that is stuck in the lodge. But at this point in Twin Peaks history, Cooper hasn't even went to Twin Peaks yet. He doesn't even know about the Black Lodge. He hasn't even been there yet, other than in his dreams. We're getting a lot of the, and it's hard to explain because it's David Lynch, but you're getting into a lot of the kind of the explanation that maybe this could all be in a dream, because even David Bowie and Philip Jeffries in this scene mentions like we're living in a dream. And even through the Twin Peaks The Return series, that comes up a lot. Like, are we living in a dream? And then the final episode, like, what year is this? Like, you don't really know where you're at any point in time. It's like the multiverse or something like that. It's crazy. But I'm not going to go in and try and explain anything. It's so confusing. But as Philip Jeffries is there and talking with Gordon Cole and Cooper and Miguel Ferrera's character, it gets cut in and out because you're going into a lot of crazy David Lynch shit. You're going into the room above the convenience store that was created by Judy or Jaude, but it's a room that includes the woodsman that you see in The Return. It has the arm from the TV series, and he's talking to Bob across from a green formica table, talking about Garmin Boza, which is like cream corn, which represents pain and sorrow, and Bob wants all the pain and sorrow, and the Garmin Boza. And then you get the jumping man. It's all so weird, and it's all very David Lynch, and I love every minute of it, man. I love it. Just as quickly as David Bowie, Philip Jeffries came in, he disappears. He vanishes.
He's gone! Albert, call the front desk!
I've got the front desk now. He was never here.
And then they check the security cameras, and he was there. So it's like, where is he? What's going on here? And you actually, going and watching the missing pieces, you actually get a little scene of what happens to David Bowie after he disappears. He pretty much teleports to, I think it's Panama or Cuba, wherever he was before. But yeah, it begs the question, like, where did he come from? Where was he this whole time? What was he looking for? What did he mean by we're living inside of a dream? Who is Cooper? Is he the bad Coop? Is he the good Coop? Who knows? So as they're looking at this tape, Gordon Cole informs Dale Cooper that Chet Desmond has gone missing. They don't know what happened to him. He's gone, similar to Philip Jeffries. And then Cooper decides to take it upon himself to go check out the trailer park. He notices in the empty lot where that trailer was, where Chet Desmond found the ring and went missing, it's gone. It's just an empty lot now. Cooper goes over there and checks it out. He asks him who owns the trailer that was there, and he's like, oh, it was just an old lady and a little boy. Name by Chalfont. But he's like, what's interesting was the people that lived there before them were also named Chalfont. It's weird. And for anybody that watched Twin Peaks or has seen this movie, you know the old lady and the little boy, they go by Chalfont, they go by Desmond as well. I have no idea what they represent. I'm guessing they're just entities within the Black Lodge trying to just attract people over there. But we'll get to them because they actually talk to Lara later in the movie. Dale Cooper is looking around, investigating. He turns around and he sees Chet Desmond's car there. And he's like, wait a minute. That's his car. And he walks over, and written, and it looks like it's in lipstick, and big red letters says "Let's Rock" right on the windshield, which is a throwback to, they say it numerous times throughout the series. Chet Desmond has disappeared into the Black Lodge at this point, from what we can assume. The final scene here at the beginning that wraps it up is Dale Cooper just insinuates, he says, this isn't over. The killer is going to strike again at some point in time, and we're going to find him. And then you get that classic, great Angelo Badalamenti Twin Peaks score. You get introduced to Lara Palmer. You actually get to see Lara Palmer in the flesh. It's not Maddie. It's not her dead body wrapped in plastic. Nope, it's Lara Palmer, played by Sheryl Lee. She goes and picks up her friend Donna. A lot of this movie you actually know by hearsay and them trying to solve the case in the original Twin Peaks series. There's only a couple things that are somewhat new to the story. And I think that's what a lot of people were originally pissed about back in the day, is because, like, we know all this information. Obviously, we didn't see it in the show because Lara Palmer's dead. There really wasn't any flashbacks. But we know this story. We just didn't see it. So, I mean, that's why a lot of people were mad. They wanted something brand new, where obviously you get something brand new there in the first half hour with Chris Isaak's character, and they're investigating the death of Teresa Banks. But the rest of this movie, you really know what's ultimately going to happen to Lara Palmer. First off, you know who's going to kill her at this point, which it ruins a lot of the surprise. So it's really, the movie is the journey of that last 7 days leading up to Lara Palmer's death and what she was experiencing, and you really get to see her downfall and how broken of a person she is by the end of this movie. And it's sad, man. It's sad and dark and depressing, and it's a great movie. I mean, it was well written. David Lynch really did a great job with this. But you get a lot of those classic characters that make an appearance in this movie. You get Shelley, you get Leo, you get Bobby, you get Mike a little bit. You get Norma at the Double R. You got just a tiny scene with her. Even Annie, played by Heather Graham, comes back here in a little bit. We'll talk about that. And of course, Ray Wise as Leland Palmer, who has a great performance in this movie, no matter how evil he is in this movie, even though it's Bob. You get a lot of the relationship. You get to see her talking and interacting with a lot of these other characters. Her relationship with Bobby, where she's really just kind of using Bobby. to get coke to supply her drug habit. She's a coke addict. She's using James on the side as well. James simps for for Lara so hard in the movie and the show. But you really get to see the dynamic and the power that Lara has over these boys and these men throughout this movie here. And they talk about it in the show a lot too, that she had a way with getting the things that she wants. Donna is Lara's best friend. She's always concerned for her. She's wondering why she's dealing with Bobby. He's such a loser instead of James. James is a nice guy. He's more of a perfect match for you. Like, he's the perfect guy for Lara. But nope, she kind of gravitates towards the bad boys and everything like that. Donna asked Lara about, if you're falling through space, do you think you would slow down after a certain amount of time, or if you would speed up and burst into flames?
Faster and faster. For a long time, you wouldn't feel anything. Then you'd burst into fire. And the angels wouldn't help you, because they've all gone away.
That comes back a little bit later in the movie as well, but it really kind of tells you about the place that Lara's in at this point in time. She's not in a good place. She goes home, she checks her hidden space for her hidden diary, finds that there's pages missing in there. She runs and talks to Harold, who is just one of my least favorite characters of the series. Luckily, he only has a small part in this. She gives him the secret diary to hold on to, which you'll see it throughout the TV series. A lot of this movie, there's a lot of setup for not only the explanations of them solving the case, but throughout this movie, you get a lot of things like, oh, that's how this got there. This is how this got there. This explains this. It's connecting the dots pretty much to what you see in the show. Then you get another scene with Cooper and Albert. Albert, he's telling Albert, like, next murder happens, we're going to solve this case. We're going to figure it out. And it's pretty interesting because Albert's, like, asking him these questions.
Will the next victim be a man or a woman?
A woman.
What color hair will she have?
Blonde.
Tell me some other things about her.
She's in high school. She is sexually active. She's using drugs. Crying out for help.
He pretty much, to a T, describes Lara Palmer, whereas Albert's like, oh, that could be any damn high school girl at all. But to a T, it describes Lara Palmer. And then you go to the Double R Diner, you get to see Norma and Shelley a little bit for Laura's Meals on Wheels, where she delivers the meals to, like, Harold, who's a recluse at his house, and some of these other people. And she actually bumps into Mrs. Chalfont and the kid that you see from the show that they disappear, and you see her a couple times in this movie as well. But she gives her a picture of just this room with this doorway in it, and the kid even tells her,
The man behind the mask is looking for the book with the pages torn out. He is going toward the hiding place.
which pretty much means Bob is looking for your hidden book, your hidden diary. She immediately runs home. Shelley has to deal with Meals on Wheels. And when she walks into her room, Bob is behind her little dresser looking for her book. She immediately runs out of the house. She kind of hides in like a bush area, and then you immediately see Leland walking out of the house. And she's in denial at this point. Like, no, it can't be him. It's not him. It can't be him. Where everybody knows Bob is Leland. Bob is inside of Leland. She goes and hangs out with Donna, comes home later at night, and then you get a very uncomfortable scene with Leland. With her and Leland at the dinner table. Leland's making a big deal about how her hands are dirty and everything, have to wash under her fingernails. And he specifically points at like her ring fingernail where he's been hiding the letters. But it's just a very uncomfortable scene, and it just shows you the broken home that they have at this point. And that night, as like Laura's doing her homework, whatever, you see Leland kind of snapping in and out of being himself and being Bob. You can see it on his face, facial expression. He turns back into Leland. Bob leaves him for a minute, and he starts breaking down because he realizes what he's done. And then he goes and he apologizes to Laura. He says he loves her and everything. And then he leaves. And then as Laura's going to bed, she takes a look at the picture that Miss Chalfont gave her that she hung up on the wall, and then it kind of teleports her into the picture. It's kind of a portal into the Black Lodge where she can see these entities and everything. In the Black Lodge, you see the green and gold ring on the table. Cooper talks to the arm. One of my favorite scenes, like the arm is telling Cooper who he is.
I am the arm, and I sound like this.
immediately tells Laura, do not take the ring. Do not put the ring on. Like, don't take it. You don't want anything to do with this. When she wakes up, Annie, from the end of the Twin Peaks Season 2 series, played by Heather Graham, is laying in her bed with blood all over her, and she gives her the message.
My name is Annie. I've been with Dale and Laura. The good Dale is in the lodge, and he can't leave. Write it in your diary.
And that's one of the missing pages that Hawk finds in the return eventually. When she actually wakes up, the ring that she has is now gone. She takes the picture down too. She's like, I don't want anything to do with this. This is nuts. And then it goes into probably one of the more uncomfortable scenes of the movie. Donna confronts Laura. Laura's going out for the night. Donna wants to know where. She's it's none of your business. She goes to the roadhouse, runs into the log lady, who just has like who's like the prophet of Twin Peaks pretty much. She can see a lot of things that a lot of people can't, and her log speaks to her.
When this kind of fire starts, it is very hard to put out. Tender boughs of innocence burn first, and the wind rises, and then all goodness is in jeopardy.
And then Laura walks into the roadhouse. You get Julie Cruz, rest in peace, is singing one of her songs, and just the atmosphere is so dark and melancholy as Laura's walking through the roadhouse while the song's playing. Jacques, who's there, a lot of people, if Jacques is a Canadian in the show that works with Leo, and he's just a drug dealer, and he also works the roadhouse prostituting some of these girls out, as you see in this scene here. He gets a couple clients for Laura at the roadhouse there, a couple of grown men going after like this, pretty much paying to get with this high school girl. Donna walks in because Donna's kind of trying to figure out what's happening with Laura. A very uncomfortable scene. Donna walks over. Laura's like, what the hell are you doing here? You don't want anything to do with this. And then like Laura kind of shows Donna what she's into, and she starts making out with this dude, and she's like talking about going all the way. And then Donna starts making out with the other dude, and Laura's like, all right, Donna, is this how you want it to be? All right, let's go for the ride. Because they go from the roadhouse to the pink room, as they call it, and it's one of the coolest fucking music cues in the movie, and one of my favorites of David Lynch's, because David Lynch always has really good music in his stuff. Oddly enough, the song is called The Pink Room, and it plays throughout this whole scene, and it's just this dark club lit by like red and pink lights. It's so gritty and dirty and gross. There's naked girls dancing all over the place. Everybody's like drinking, doing drugs, having sex with each other. And it's very realistic, because as they're talking, the music is so loud in this place that throughout the whole scene, and this scene's probably like maybe 10 minutes long or so, you don't really hear any of the dialogue. It's all subtitled because the music is so loud. You can only make out little bits and pieces of what they're saying. And I actually really like that in this movie. It's very realistic, because if you go to a club and music's playing, you're not going to hear a damn thing that anybody's talking to you about. So it's very realistic in that aspect. This is an uncomfortable scene as well, just because you really get the feeling, you really get to be in Donna's shoes in this scene, just because how uncomfortable you feel. Like, you're out of your element at this point. Donna hasn't been anywhere near anything like this, and she's entering Laura's world at this point. And Laura strangely looks comfortable, and she looks like she's in her element at this point. Whereas you're taking the ride with Donna, you're completely uncomfortable. You feel like you need a shower. This is not the place for you. And as they're kind of mingling and talking, they slip a roofie, they slip drugs into Donna's beer. You get to run into Ronette Pulaski, who you know from the original series. She was one of the girls that was found walking along the train tracks all beaten up, that was there with Laura, and apparently Laura worked with her at One-Eyed Jack's back in the day. Lara hasn't seen her in a while. They talked about how Teresa's been dead for a year, so it's a year jump from, you know, the Chet Desmond stuff at the beginning of the movie up until now. Lara is getting serviced by one of these dudes. She's talking with Ronette in this booth, and she looks over, and Ronette looks over, and she's like, "Wait a minute, is that Donna Hayward? What the hell is she doing here?" And Lara looks over, and Donna is like half naked, laying on this table. This dude's like trying to date rape her, and Lara fucking freaks out, man. Because she knows this is not the place for Donna, and she flips out, and she runs over. She just like smacks the dude off him. She's trying to pull Donna away. She gets Jacques to take her away, get her out of this place. So she pretty much saves Donna at that point. You get a small scene, which sets up a scene later in the movie with Bobby calling Leo, saying that he wants to get more coke and everything like that. He tells him to talk to Jacques. He calls Jacques. Jacques says that there's going to be a guy out in the middle of the woods near the sawmill. Go out there at night. He'll hook you up. Just make sure you have the dough. Lara and Leland driving together. They pull up to like this line at a stoplight, and the light post there is the number 6, like you saw earlier in the movie. And Mike, who you see throughout the course of Twin Peaks, who is usually an entity within the lodge, he's actually going around. He's trying to find Bob, because he was Mike was Bob's old partner back in the day. They were killers, but Mike got out of that shit. He ended up cutting his arm off, but he's been trying to track down Bob to stop him. And he fucking whips around. He drives right up next to Leland and Lara there, and he starts screaming at him.
That red will be torn! It's yours!
And Lara's like, something smells like it's burning. Like, what's that smell? It's like a burnt motor oil, like a dark, weird, gross smell. And that's usually what comes from whenever Bob is around or Bob is killing somebody. You get that smell. Leland is like revving his engine trying to get out of here, and it's just tons of noise, and you can barely hear Bob yelling. But Bob's yelling at Lara like, "It's him, it's your father, it's your father." He's trying to tell her like it's Bob. Your father is Bob, and she's just not listening. She's going through it right now. While Mike is yelling at him, you notice that Mike is wearing that golden green ring, and this is the ring she's been seeing everywhere, and he's wearing that. And immediately after Mike drives off, they kind of pull off to the side there. Leland is kind of in his own trance. He's remembering, and then you get a flashback of him. He actually knew Teresa Banks, and he's the one that obviously killed her whenever he's with Teresa, that, he would like to set up a meeting with her and her 2 friends to get together so they can have some fun. Well, he shows up to the motel, and those 2 friends were Lara, his daughter, and Ronette Pulaski, and he immediately backs out. Like, yep, I'm done. I don't want any of this. And then you get the kid running out and jumping all along the parking lot and shit. She's trying to process everything she's seen happen at this point. She goes out with Bobby. Bobby takes her to go get the score out in the middle of the woods. They're both loaded. She's drunk as hell.
What?
That's a good one. That's really good. You're great.
The guy tries to pull a gun on him. Bobby ends up shooting and killing him, where everybody knows you get that famous line. She's like, "Bobby killed a guy," when she talks to James later. But Bobby shoots the shit out of this dude, and then you end up taking the drugs and piecing out. And then you get the other most uncomfortable scene in the movie. When Lara gets home, she goes up to bed. Leland gives milk to Sarah, which has drugs in it, which usually knocks her out. That way he can get away with what he does every so often, which is Bob goes and sneaks through Laura's window and rapes her, which is super uncomfortable, man, because not only is it rape, but it's incest as well. Because as he's doing the deed, Lara is like, "Who are you? Who are you? I need to know." And then immediately it just flashes, and then she finds out it's Leland. It's her own dad that's been doing this since she was 12 years old. From that point till the end of the movie, she's just wrecked. This just completely destroys her. When she leaves the next day, she goes to school, and she's not herself. She's just out of it. She's crying. She's a million miles away. She's just in her thoughts this whole time, and you could tell that was the last thing. That was the last straw. that night before she leaves, she's like doing coke and stuff, and as she's leaving, she takes a look at this one picture on her wall that you see, just kind of this picture of like these kids, and then there's an angel in there, and the angel disappears, which in my eyes it represents the last bit of innocence that she had left, is finding out that her father's been doing this to her all these years, and that was the last bit of innocence that she had left, and that's why you see that angel disappear. And then this is the final night of Lara Palmer's life. This is what a lot of Twin Peaks viewers and fans know about just watching through the show. You know how this all happens. She goes out with James. She talks about, like, I know you love me, but I pity you. Like, she's just not herself. She's acting like very bipolar. She's just going back and forth between all these different emotions. She doesn't even know how she feels because she doesn't know how to process all of this information that she has and what she's been going through this whole time.
You don't even know me. There are things about me. Even Donna doesn't know me.
But she ends up jumping off of James's bike. And before she even leaves, she even tells him, "I love you." She screams it in his ear. But she ends up running off into the woods. Where if I was James, I mean, he just took off. I would have actually went and looked for her. You can't just let the person you love just run into the woods by themselves. But yeah, she ends up meeting up with Leo and Jacques and Ronette. They go back to their cabin. They have some fun. Well, Leo and Jacques have some fun. They end up tying Lara and Ronette up. Jacques leaves. Leland's actually sneaks because Leland's watching. Leela watches as Lara takes off with James, and he's pretty much following her the whole time. He follows him up to the cabin. He's looking through the windows as Jacques and Leo are doing their things with Lara and Ronette. As Jacques leaving, Leland knocks his ass out with a bottle. And then once Leo pieces out, he goes in and grabs Lara and Ronette, and Lara's just freaking out at this point. Oh, it's such a scary scene to me. It's just that scene where it's like a flashlight on all three of them as they're running through the woods, and Leland just has this like scary nightmarish face on behind him as he's holding the rope, holding both of them, and they're crying. They have makeup all over their face. But he takes them to the train car, and he inevitably murders Lara. He murders his daughter there. Now Mike is running through those woods trying to catch up to him, and he slides open the door of the car. And it's odd because Ronette is tied up in the corner of the train car, and she looks up and she sees an angel there. And when an angel disappears, her ropes that are around her wrists are suddenly untied, and she tries to get out. And as she's getting out, Mike gets there and he throws the ring in. And as Leland is just viciously, brutally murdering Lara, she puts the ring on, which inevitably traps her into the Black Lodge throughout the rest of the series and everything. And that's why she is there. She puts that ring on. Even Cooper told her, don't put the ring on. Don't take the ring. And as she's getting murdered, she puts the ring on and she goes into the Black Lodge. And Leland, of course, as everybody knows, wraps her in plastic, throws her in the river, just to be found by Pete Martell, and sets up the events of the Twin Peaks series itself. And then you get a couple of final scenes here. One is of Leland going into the Black Lodge itself. Their Mike and the Arm want their Garmin Boja, which is pain and sorrow, and that's what he's been collecting this whole time. And Bob kind of separates himself from Leland's body and pulls all that fear and sorrow and pain out of him and just throws all that blood on the floor and gives it to him. And then it cuts to Lara in the Black Lodge. It looks like she's looking at like a fuzzy TV like you saw at the beginning of the movie here. You don't get to see what she's looking at, but it's just light on her face, and the rest of the lodge is black. It's very dark, and Cooper's sitting there somewhat comforting her. Cooper is actually in the lodge with her, somewhat comforting her, as she's just crying in the lodge because she knows what's happened to her, and she's processing everything. And then she she looks up and there's an angel there. Her angel actually came there to save her, and she starts just crying, and then she starts laughing at the same time. It's kind of like she's somewhat at peace finally after going through all this bullshit and all this shit through her whole life, having to deal with Bob and her dad since she was 12, and then dealing with drugs and whoring herself out to who knows who at the One-Eyed Jacks and at the Roadhouse, it's finally over. And as they talk about in the series with James and everybody else who talked with Laura, she wanted to die. Like, at that point, she was ready to die. She wanted it all to end, and she knew she was going to die. But in those final moments when she's in the Black Lodge with Cooper, she kind of comes to terms with it, and it seems like she's finally happy that it's gone, that it's ended. She's finally at peace somewhat there in the lodge, which is a hell of a way to go out, given the rest of the movie is such a downer and such a hard watch for a lot of people, especially if you've ever been through those kind of things. But yeah, that's the end of the movie here. Just some final thoughts. I mean, I feel like I enjoy this movie a little bit more every time I watch it. And, mainly because I'm a huge Twin Peaks fan. Admittedly, the first time I watched it, it was okay. I didn't really think highly of it like a lot of people did their first time watching it. But the more I watch it, it does grow on me. It has quickly grown to be a favorite of mine among David Lynch's catalog, specifically because it's Twin Peaks. Because I love not just Twin Peaks as a story, but I love the characters and their development, and they all interact with each other in different ways. And I love the lore and the history of Twin Peaks. And I think and you can't tell the story of Twin Peaks, either the first 2 seasons or The Return, without Fire Walk with Me right there dead in the middle. But I highly recommend it to anybody that is a fan of Twin Peaks or David Lynch in general. I mean, if you haven't seen the show, I definitely wouldn't watch this movie if you haven't seen the show. Or if you're gonna watch a show, I wouldn't watch this first. I would totally watch the first 2 seasons, then watch this and go into The Return. Don't watch The Return without watching Fire Walk with Me, though. This is definitely important to watch before you watch The Return. But as far as the movie, it is if you feel like you need a shower after watching it, it's very gritty, it's very dark, it's very gross. It's got a lot of hard, dark subject matter in it. Which admittedly, the first time watching it made me very uncomfortable watching it. But as I continue to watch it time and time again, it does get a little easier each time. But it's a great movie. I mean, it's got a lot there. It's got I wouldn't say a little bit of everything, because the comedy and quirkiness isn't really there like the show itself. But I highly recommend the movie, though. It's a great watch, and I didn't really get to say it, but Sheryl Lee as an actress does a fucking outstanding job in this movie. She is so great, and she's such an underrated actress. I don't know why she didn't get much bigger in Hollywood. Because in this movie she acts her ass off. You get a lot of stuff from her in this movie, and she goes through such a spectrum of emotions throughout the whole thing, and dealing with all these different characters. Sheryl Lee is definitely underrated, and you really appreciate her acting ability after watching this movie, and you really see what David Lynch saw in her as an actress, but also what you see in Lara Palmer as a character, because there's a lot of depth in there. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of sorrow. There's a lot behind Lara Palmer, and I understand why he wanted to go back and revisit this character to really tell her story, instead of just relying on, just hearsay and then putting these clues together throughout the series. You actually want to be there and see her and know what she went through. Me talking about it doesn't do it justice. It's such a great movie. And if I know the subject matter and everything with the movie, it's so dark, which I understand if a lot of people that maybe have a past experience may not want to watch it, but at the very least, go watch the show itself. Those first 2 seasons, even though the second season through the back half, it does kind of slog. It's kind of sluggish. It's definitely not up to par as the rest of the series, but stick with it, man, because once you get to those final 2 episodes, it makes it all worth it. Those are one of the best 2 episodes of TV ever. But yeah, I would love to talk about Twin Peaks all the time here on this channel, but nobody else really watches Twin Peaks other than me on here, so I'm the only one that can do it. So highly recommend the Twin Peaks TV show. Go out here and buy the box set Blu-ray of all the TV series and the Return. Make sure to go out and cop the Criterion Collection Blu-ray of Fire Walk with Me. A lot of special features on here. It also includes the missing pieces, deleted scenes, And that'll be the end of the review. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Make sure to check out all the content across the Waves 5 Media channel. Make sure to follow us at Waves 5 Media on Twitter. And I'll see everybody next week for the next review.